Kia ora koutou, ko Mark tukoinga no Heratonga ki Puniki ahau, kei te pane matua tai ao ahau e mahi ana, he Kaitiaki a tīma ahau, no rena tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hi, I'm Mark from Greater Wellington Regional Council, and I'm going to be the chair of this session. It's the session before lunch, which we're all together after lunch. We'll be splitting up. Before we head off to lunch, I'll have some housekeeping, but it's my job to introduce our speakers. So to keep to time, we're already running 5 minutes late, but we'll extend it into our lunchtime by 5 minutes. So first up, we've got Michael Lavery. He'll be presenting for Kaitiaki o te Ngahere on the persistence, accuracy and timeliness managing non-native plants on South Georgia Island. So something what you might not know about Michael is he loves blue penguins and has been involved in the last decade with little blue penguins recovery in the Wellington and has done a lot of international weed control. So put your hands together.
Hi, kia ora koutou. As Mark said, ko Michael ahau. And I'm going to be talking about an international project that our company Kaitiaki o te Ngahere runs through their subsidiary arm, Indigenous Biosecurity International. What am I pointing at? Oh, there we go. So, where are we going? So we leave our little island behind, and we cross the Pacific to South America. Not sure which screen to look at. I'm going to be doing this a lot. All the way down to the southern part of the continent, and then we hop across to a little set of islands that are called the Falklands, which you may know of. From there, though, despite what this animation suggests, we catch a boat. I couldn't get it to make a boat, so it had a plane. 1,000 nautical mile sail, 4 days over to these tiny little islands, South Georgia and the South Sandwich Islands. So, few people may know of this place. It's probably best known for its connection to the British explorer Ernest Shackleton, who did an epic voyage when he crossed from Elephant Island off Antarctica to South Georgia to get help to rescue his stranded crew that were left behind on Elephant Island. Everybody else, you may or may not have seen parts of it if you're watching some of the BBC documentaries like Frozen Planets. Human history for the island. There's been whaling operating there through the 20th century up until the Whaling Commission obviously got the international ban on whaling. Since then, the British Antarctic Survey have run a research base on the island, two, one at Bird Island, which you can kind of see in the top corner up by where South Georgia's written, and one down at King Edward Point from 1969 through to the Falklands conflict, and then since 2001. After the Falklands conflict, the British military occupied a little garrison on the island, and that was, in 2001, relinquished back to the British Antarctic Survey and the government of South Georgia. Where it gets most of its notice from is cruise ships. There are many and a growing number of cruise ships making their way down to the Antarctic, and these islands get about 15,000 passengers per year. On the island, though, there are approximately 30 to 40 researchers and BAS staff that operate there through the summer months, and normally a team of somewhere between 10 and 14 that stay on through the whole year, and they transition out every year. Other than that, it is a haven for a myriad of amazing species, including the world's largest king penguin colony, albatrosses, shearwaters, petrels, whales, 5 million fur seals, which is an awesome number after they were pretty much decimated by sealers in the 20th century, and a whole lot of other visitors, including leopard seals and cetaceans. Right, so where do we come in? So to start off, in 2010, a colleague of ours was brought to the island to assess the spread of a bittercress that was quite persistent within the research base. This was done in conjunction with 2 other eradication projects, one of those being to remove rodents, and the other to remove the 7,000 odd reindeer that were brought down by the Norwegians during the whaling station days. Both of those eradications were completed in 2018, but as has been mentioned here already, plants are a bit more persistent than that, and the weed control program there is ongoing. In 2014, some money was secured through the Darwin Initiative to set up a strategic management plan for those non-native species. So what are we looking at? Well, for a start, luckily, most of the island is under permanent ice. So there's not a lot going on through the interior of the island, which means we were mostly focused on these coastal strips. It's about 8% of the total landmass of the island. And that's where, through the summer months, the snow melts away and you get vegetation growth. Prior to these surveys being conducted, there was very little known about what plants were on the island, where they were present. A lot of that came from old bass reports or visiting biologists and naturalists, but there was very spotty location information, and obviously changing taxonomies across the years made it difficult to keep track. So there was a lot of walking and a lot of sailing to different parts of the island, accessing primarily the vegetative strip where human presence was most felt, so the whaling stations, where sealers and scientists have been based across the years. After that, we got a pretty good idea of what the spread of the native species were doing, and invasives. So what did we find? First off, they found 50 non-native species and 24 native species, not non-native. The decision was made with the government of South Georgia that there wasn't going to be getting bogged down by what was and wasn't a weed. We're going to tackle everything. A big job. So alongside that, the book that you can see on the side there was produced alongside the Royal Botanic Gardens queue and was provided on the island and to all the passing cruise ships that were coming through as well. And then in 2016, a non-native plant strategy was put in place, and Indigenous part of Kaitiaki, or Te Ngahere, was then appointed to implement. So, a very quick run through this. What did we do there? There's a lot of species on the island. First step was breaking them down into groups. Class 1 being the biggest, it includes pretty much all of the species. These are small distributions, easily controlled populations that we can keep on top of. These are set for eradication. So the aim is to remove these from the island completely, and these 4 present some of the biggest challenges on the island, the bittercress up in the top corner being the one that we originally came to assess. And sheep sorrel down in the bottom right, which has been a very persistent target with 46,000 square metres having been treated over the course of this project. Class 2s. So stepping down from that, we're now looking at species that have much wider distributions. They still have a big impact on the landscape, but object with these currently, while we're still dealing with a lot of the class 1s, is containment. So keeping them within the zones that we know they are and trying to reduce their spread out into the wider area. And then finally, class 3. These ones are currently a bit too far gone to be dealing with on the large scale. Ideally, sometime we'll be able to tackle these, but currently it's not a feasible objective. Luckily, there are only 3 that fit this bill. We also have, as a little extra, a little research class. This covers off things that are newly discovered or have a very small distribution. So the Falklands native that's mentioned there, Gualtheria, is found on one hillside that we know of. And so that is being treated as a research class until we get some more information on the DNA and the genetics for how it relates to its Falkland relatives. and then a couple of other species, one of those being discovered early this year. So where are we at now? So after the surveys, and as of 2025, there are now 85 non-native plants that have been recorded on the island. 31 of those are managed at a eradication level, 4 at containment, and then there's the 3 that are mentioned in the naturalised and widespread research categories as well. There has also been an extra native that's been found, which has been pretty cool. One of our long-running Indigenous staff discovered the hybrid poa that's on the right-hand side, and that has now officially been accepted as a new species through a lot of extra work by experts across the world, and is currently undergoing a formal description. So working on the island. It's a pretty small window to do pest plant control in good conditions. As I say, most of the island is covered by ice for a lot of the year. So through the summer, we get a 2 or 3 month window that we can go in and actually do feasible weed control. And because of that, the timing is really, really important. You've got species that will very quickly start producing seed because they've only got a short window to do so. So we are assessing each individual space annually. We've got 236 sites that we are checking every single year. And we do that consistently. 37 are checked on a 2-yearly basis. These are now getting towards a state where we're starting to look at them possibly being moved to a historic. And then there's species like that bittercrest that we came to review in 2010. That requires currently 3 separate sweeps across that season just to make sure that we are getting as many of those plants before they seed as possible. Can't remember what I've done here. To do this, South Georgia has very, very limited internet and data capabilities, internet being pretty much restricted to the single science base at King Edward Point. So to do any of this control work and keep a track of it, a custom app had to be built, so that could be used offline across the island. Utilizes a couple of different point systems, one of those being the blue ones that you can see. They have a color change system in them so that we can monitor which sites we've been to, and those get reset every year after about 300 days so that when the next year rolls around, they're already loaded up and they're ready for us to go in next time. There is recent updates put a little traffic light system on there now, so the species that can be checked on a 2-yearly or longer basis now have that information built in too. It also tracks all of our points and spray diaries through the season. And that was built in conjunction with the Antarctic Research Trust, who do a lot of work also on the Falkland Islands, and they are also making use of this system. So how has it been going? Here's a little example. So on the hillside here, you can see, hopefully from back there, you can see there's some darker green rings. This is a species Agrostis capillaris, and the slight red tinge on the hillside there is the sheep sorrel that we mentioned before. So this is that primary site for the sheep sorrel. What is it looking like now? 2021, when this photo was taken, the Agrostis and the sheep sorrel are now primarily gone. We are dealing with the seed bank persistently. There's still, if you can see the bottom graph there, there's still about 400 square metres being treated yearly. But we are just now getting into that seed bank, and again, persistence being the key to finally getting this population under control. So if you did the math on that earlier slide that I had the 85 species, you'll notice 44 of them weren't there. They are considered extinct or historic. So we have eliminated them. A lot of these species were sort of one-offs. They were planted in and around whaling stations. There was plants introduced through the grave sites, where as part of a lot of the Norwegian burials, they bury with soil from the homeland. And so that also introduced a few seeds, unfortunately. but many of these were small singular plants, but a few now are being added to the list, and we added another 6 to that list this year just been. As I mentioned, a lot of these have very long-lasting seed banks. We are dealing with these for a long time, and this is not something that's new to anybody who does pest plant control. These things last a long, long time. So we're treating these with a 7 to 8 year consecutive zero detection before we consider them to be eliminated. And some things just don't want to die. This Senecio was discovered by a colleague in 2024. The last time it was seen was the late 60s. We believe a shipping container that had been sitting there for a while got moved, and then some sunlight found those seeds and they popped off. So luckily still within inside its historic range, but yeah, these things do last a while. And our experience here in New Zealand through Kaitiaki has been key to implementing a lot of this control. We try our best to work with the good spray conditions, but unfortunately the island doesn't play that way. And even in the midsummer, you can get scenes like this where you get complete coverage of snow. And so some manual labour has to be done to get to those species. Other sites are just too steep for us to deal with. And this is probably about the limit on those bluffs that we willingly want to go. So alternate methods had to be found to deal with the species that were hiding up on these bluffs. And that included the use of a drone. So with a drop system that can be used by the controller and a very makeshift herbicide container. Oh, that's got sound. That's cool. The small amounts of metsulfurin are taken up onto the hillside and then dropped using that system down onto the target species. The system is working well, from what we can tell. There's still a bit of uncertainty about how effective the delivery is being on the actual control of these populations. Unfortunately, because of how steep the bluffs are, getting the drone that close to them as well, it can be a little hard to gauge where the dispersal of those metsulfurin granules actually go. So we've dropped the herbicide rate down to the bare minimum, and we're going with more of a constant follow-up rather than just going for a one-hit kill. Just drop a little bit and then come back to it, see how it's going, try again, and see where we get to from there. So that's, for the most part, the control work that's going on the island. What we're doing though is a lot of native species recording. So very similar to the weed control, there is a custom-built app that allows us to record native species presence and absence on the island. The whole island is laid out with grids 5 kilometres by 5 kilometres, and in those, as we're travelling around the island, we are marking the presence and absence of all of those species. So we're starting to build a really robust idea of the non-natives and the natives across the vegetated areas on the island. And again, this was also built alongside the Targeted Research Trust. We also have iNaturalist. So as I'm sure everyone's aware, this is becoming a bigger and bigger thing, particularly for our industries and science. Created in 2020, this project was designed to capture all of the iNaturalist observations being made across the island. Primarily, these are coming out of cruise ships visiting tourists and naturalists who come to the island and take plenty of photos. And it allows us to keep a tab on what's going on as well. We also have a pretty big involvement with that ourselves. The project is very consistently actively monitored by myself and another one of our colleagues. And as part of that, 400 of those observations have come from our team, and over 1,000 of the identifications have also come from our involvement in that, which is really cool. It's also proven really, really effective. It's led to the discovery of a new location for a species that hadn't been registered on the island before. by a visiting biologist. And while I'm still going to got to confirm some of this, there may have been another one just last week as well. Again, a visiting cruise ship. Somebody's taken a photo and we went, oh, that's a bit weird. So, now let's get to the scenic shots, because that's what we want to see. What is working here actually like? Well, the accommodation is all over the paddock. The main base down in the bottom right-hand corner is where a lot of the year is based and is the main hub for the British Antarctic Survey. There's also the old managers' villas at some of the whaling stations have been done up so that the science teams can run operations out there. And there's little field huts across the island that can be accessed and used as well. The insulation in those is shocking though. Getting around. A lot of getting around the island is by boat. A lot of areas can't be feasibly accessed by foot because there are huge glaciers and just impassable peaks and bluffs making a lot of the traversing the island quite difficult. But we have a great team on the island who give us access to a lot of places using the available boats. And the fisheries patrol vessel up in the top left too does a lot of getting us around to the wider extent of the island. But in saying that, a lot of it is still covered on foot. Wide areas, over 400 kilometres per staff per season on average, we're covering on this landscape, which is pretty cool. There's some small downsides to working here. It's not all good news. There's these guys, the Antarctic fur seals. After their recovery, they're estimated at about 5 million. They litter the beaches during the summer months and they are not happy to see us. They are much more aggressive than our native kikino, and we do have to carry a broom handle basically just to keep them at bay because they are full testosterone mode during those months. We also have the even bigger southern elephant seal, 5 tons of pure aggression. You don't want to get in their way. And as you can see, they pop out of the grass quite nicely when you're not expecting it. So it's all good fun. There's also remnants from the military. They got real bored while they were watching that island, and so they fired into the hillsides for fun. So there's unexploded ordnance occasionally gets found on the island. These are pretty quickly dealt with and cordoned off, and then the military get to come in and blow up something again, so keeps them happy. Is that done or 5 minutes? Okay, cool. Yep, so some last scenic shots. It's a pretty amazing place to get to work. A cool project, and the long-term impacts are going to be fantastic. Cheers.